Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the T.H.O. Movie Reviews podcast, the show where we bring you passionate, honest, and insightful film criticism. I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson, here to review Blade Runner 2049, and to pull off that feat, I've got two of my wonderful colleagues right here, starting with Shaunette. Mo, you have a drink? You have a lime or something in there? How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm better than the last time we sat and talked about a movie afterwards, so I'm doing all right.
Wait, what was that?
That was Mother.
Mother, oh, right, because right, for a second I was like, were you sick last time? And then it's like, no, we just say Mother.
No,
so.
I was a little sick, but more from anger.
It was that, yeah, I'm doing all right. This is the sound of my voice.
And also here we have Maxwell and Meyers. Max, you also have a drink. It's a little thinner, it's a little taller, but you got a straw. How are you doing?
Is that an integral part of these introductions, is what we're drinking?
I would be okay with that transition if that means I get to drink every time we get together, but I might be a borderline alcoholic, quote unquote. I don't know, Ben. I'm like
need alcohol to deal with you people, quote quotes.
Oh my God. Let's get a little philosophical too here. We're talking about a Blade Runner sequel. You all know the best replicants are the ones who seem the most human, so I like to inject a little humanity into the proceedings so people don't think we're just robots who, can only talk about movies.
Well, I'm a robot, but I talk about several things.
We've seen things you wouldn't believe.
Like tech ships on fire. Oh, God. I better not get started.
Have you ever seen a miracle? I have. Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Well, but before we get started, there's a little story behind this review because it's not quite what we intended. We were originally going to do it a couple days earlier. We moved the date, so the plan was we would all see this movie together and react to it. I was the first person to fuck up the plan. I was impatient and saw it Thursday night, so spoiler alert, this is the second time I've seen this, so,
I just
I'm
saw
coming in super drunk on Blade Runner.
I just saw it yesterday, and right before I saw it yesterday, I watched the original Blade Runner.
You did.
We went full Blade Runner. I went director's cut. I went right into 2049.
Nice,
I am ready for this. I'm just too poor to come see the movie twice.
All right, well, let's get started. Mo, I believe you used the phrase "not enchanted by the movie." As they say in college classes, say more about that.
Well, this is the first time I'm seeing it. We sat down. I was seeing it with Ben here at the Baghdad Theater. Plug. And we just got out, and my first thought was, and that was it.
I like it short, succinct.
I'm sorry to disappoint, but I feel about this movie like the same way as I did about Dunkirk, which is this is a phenomenally well-made movie. This is high-class filmmaking, really well-done art, but there's just not enough there in the story to really pull me in. I like Ryan Reynolds Ryan Gosling as much as the next guy.
I like Ryan Reynolds more than I like my Ryan Gosling, but that's a different podcast.
I like Ryan Gosling as much as the next guy, but I'm not gonna lose my mind over 2 hours of him looking very confused. So I can see why people would like it, and I think it's very well made. I think Denis Villeneuve did a good job. I think they did their best to capture the spirit of the original, but the original was so much of a lightning in a bottle kind of thing that there's something lost in the translation. So yeah, I thought it was fine. A lot of good stuff in it. They weren't too heavy-handed with the callbacks, which was nice. Except until the very end.
This is no Force Awakens.
This is it's
for better or worse.
I think that for me, movies like this where it's very introspective, meditative sci-fi, where it's a lot of nothing happens and you're just left to kind of ponder the ideas and themes and theories that are presented. That stuff is fine, but it's not something I'm super into because I have ADD and so my mind's gonna wander, and I'm just within the first 5 seconds, I'm going to be like, okay, I get this idea. Let's move on. And let's move on. And there's another minute of just scenery. And let's move on. And, oh, look, something's happening. So, yeah. So, I was not... Call me, the ignorant fucking troglodyte that I am, but I was not super enchanted with this. I thought it was fine.
I want to hear what Max has to say, but first, you are one of the least ignorant people I know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's I'm just going to leave it at that because it's the truth.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Max, I want to hear what you think, but first of all, you told me you saw this with your dad for his birthday. I want to hear what your dad thought.
My dad thought it was okay. He goes, that is definitely an afternoon movie. You do not want to watch that at 7:45 at night. I was getting so tired. My back, I was about to watch the last end of that movie standing up. I was just waiting by the exit. That was such a long movie. That's what my dad thought. Happy birthday, Dad. Love that impression. I'm gonna go counterpoint with Mo's opinion. Drama? No. I loved it. I mean, I wouldn't say it was one of the best movies I've seen this year, because that's a very high bar to hit. But I think it was great. I think Mo makes a really great point. It was not heavy-handed with the callback. It really had its one story. It focused on that one story. It lingered, as he said, with the scenery. But I think that was kind of worth it. I mean, the beauty of the first Blade Runner, as Mo said, it was kind of a lightning in a bottle. It was, that movie takes place 2 years from now, and so to see what they thought the future might look like is always a fun task to do. Like, it's like 30 years from now, yeah, that seems feasible, but no, apparently not. No, still no flying cars. I don't think we're gonna make it. But with the original, you do get this really weird world that has a familiarity to it that I think Ridley Scott really tapped into quite well, that not a lot of directors do. They don't all do well all the time, and it isn't done very often. So,
well, Ridley Scott, I mean, he made a surrealist art film, and that doesn't really get made on this scale hardly ever.
No, but I mean, it works, and so I think it is nice to see, like, to address that we are in a familiar world, but somehow in the future, further in the future, and how does that change? And I mean, in the original, it's a lot of Asian culture being used because there was a high rate of Asian immigrants coming in at that time, so they just determined by the rate of growth that's how it would be. And now this time, there's a few more ethnicities represented within the world, and I liked it.
They now have 2 Latino people instead of 1.
Well, we also have Bakar Abdi playing Dr. Badger.
For one scene. By the way, I should say this is a spoilers review, so.
Oh, yeah. I was like, not much happens in that one scene, but other than his name is Dr. Badger, so I think that's probably there. But I loved it. I thought it was great. I think this movie continues on a nice string of something we'll cover later, which is strong female characters. Ryan Gosling, yeah, I mean, I think he leaves a little bit to be desired. Ryan
Gosling's a very strong female character.
No, but Ryan Gosling does leave a little bit to be desired, but he's also playing a robot, and you know what? This is the first time his robotic acting skill set that he uses actually worked, because he was actually playing a robot as opposed to a detached, emotional human being.
Sure.
Which,
very well cast, yeah.
I was like, I think the movie does well. It lingers in some spots, but I think most of the scenes are necessary, while also setting up some great visuals along with it, which is nice. Because sometimes directors like to just look at how beautiful it is. All right, back to plot. Look at the beauty. And this one kind of
self-indulgent.
Yeah, and so this one kind of this one is kind of nice. It kind of worked the plot within the self-indulgencies. I really noticed it. This isn't a spoiler, in the constant memory of Ryan Gosling going back to the orphanage.
Yes.
And they use that memory to set up great shots, great scenery, cinematography, lighting, the whole shebang, while also using plot within it. And again, it was a nice trend of people going, what if it wasn't just a sci-fi movie and a sequel, but a good movie too? Like, again, that weird
a sequel good,
like a weird and it starts with, as Mo pointed out, not leaning entirely on your predecessor.
Yes.
So I think Denis Villeneuve. Oh, I can't. French Dennis did a great job.
French Canadian Denis.
French Canadian Dennis.
I actually know how to pronounce it. It is, and I know this because I heard him say it himself. It's Villeneuve.
Villeneuve.
So there's no N in the middle. It's a silent N. It's Villeneuve.
Villeneuve. All right. Either way, Villeneuve, you did a great job.
The last time we were here, we were reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and it was sort of like our first responses was like a descending staircase. Like Max, you loved it. Mo, you loved it a little less, and I was on the not liking it side of things. This time it's more like we're going up
We're
because
going up the
I
stairs.
fucking loved it. Max,
surprise,
you
surprise.
said maybe not one of the best films of the year. I'm going to take it a step further. This is a contender for my favorite film of the year. It bowled me over. It does what I think the first one did so well is offers a great sensory experience because I spend a lot of time thinking about the first one. What does it all mean? And while I think that's an important question, part of the excitement of that film is just being ushered into this poetic, beautiful neo-noir world, and I think this one did that well with the dark buildings and the lights of the advertisements and kind of the gloomy romanticism of the rain and whatnot. But I think it's a great story as well. You mentioned that Ryan Gosling is playing a robot instead of a guy who is trying to figure out whether he's human or not. We have someone who knows he's not human, a Pinocchio who wants to be a real boy and goes on this journey of longing to have something real. Those Robin, I think it was Robin Wright who said this line, we're all looking out for something real, and in the end he finds out he's not real. He finds out he's not special. He's not the proverbial sci-fi chosen one. But
spoilers.
Yeah. As I said, spoiler review.
He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy.
Yes, but
Wait,
what he finds out.
It's from Monty Python.
Oh my goodness.
What he finds out is that like Caesar in the Planet of the Apes films, he realizes being human isn't about how you're made. It's about what you do. It's you're defined by your actions, and that's why I think even more than the first one, I think this is an emotional film, and I think it's about finding these scraps of beauty in this horrible, but admittedly very cool looking dystopia. But moving on, I want to get into this idea of the sensory experience versus the intellectual content, and this is vague, and you guys can run with this or say this is a crazy question if you want, but I want to hear from you guys, like how you think they intertwine, like what you think the meaning of the decor, the mise en scène, the ambiance is, and what the meaning of the story, of the narrative of the script is, and how they work together, or maybe even clash in some cases.
So I really feel like this kind of like opens up just expands upon the ideas kind of just left with Blade Runner. Before it was like, here's a story with some ideas, and now here's some ideas with a story. And I think that was the next step.
Can you say that again? But before it was a story with.
It was a story. It was a story with some ideas, and now this is some ideas with a story. Like I feel like
you think the ideas come first.
Well, I feel like with the original Blade Runner, primarily we really don't bring up these morality questions too much. Like I think it's I think Rachel brings up have you ever worried that you've killed someone that wasn't a replicant? How are you so sure? And then you have these replicants who are they just want a life. They want the human experience. They only get to live for 4 years, but they want it, and they're willing to murder for it. And so it's him stopping it. That's the real driving point of the story. But this one kind of really opens up with these are the ideas, these are the consequences that they have, and now there's a story that has to go along with it. I feel like this one had more ideas driving it than story, but not in a bad way, just more so than the last one. No, because it brings up a lot of moral conundrums than the last one did.
It does, and I want to speak to a couple of points that you made. You talked about the aesthetic not necessarily having a point, and I think there's something to that. Like, I remember coming out of this movie and thinking, this is sort of a boys and their toys movie.
Yeah.
It's got like skyscrapers. It's got like this futuristic weaponry, a flying car. Like, just even that first shot of.
No, I did not.
Just even that first shot of Ryan Gosling in the flying car, like I think back and I feel like, wow, that was just badass. Like stuff like that makes me feel like a kid, watching Star Wars again. And then to speak to your idea of the ideas of the ideas, going further in this one, I mean, I think the interesting thing is how the story of the replicants is evolving forward now.
Yeah.
Because we had in the first movie, they're trying to survive. In this one, now we see there's an underground replicant movement. There's a revolution brewing. There's a spark of hope amidst all of that, and I think that's one thing. I mean, I think it's too early to say oh, this one's definitely better or it's definitely not quite up to the first one. But I think that's really poignant, that moment when you see these replicants coming out of the shadows and you see how many of them, and you see that there's a better world out there from this dystopia, and I think that's a very hopeful thing that you wouldn't have found in the first movie. And even then, the climax with the seawall, which is sort of a symbol of everything wrong in the world. Humanity messed with the environment. Now the sea levels are rising. Now they built this this wall to keep nature out.
And they make the ocean pay for it.
Yes, yeah, and it's funny with the wall being built in War for the Planet of the Apes and the wall in this.
In
while
Los
the walls
Angeles.
Being built in this movie. What could that be about? But the thing is, you see this moment where Ryan Gosling sacrifices himself to save Harrison Ford at this place that's a symbol of humankind's folly, and yet there's this spark of optimism. So I think there is like this this hope in the very, very literal darkness. Because you are right, Mo. There are not a lot of lights turned on in this movie.
I don't think anyone should at this point really determine if this one's better than the last one, especially because it really took the last one several years to really mature and grow and find its footing in really sci-fi history at this point. Blade Runner is a part of sci-fi history at this point. I would really just look at this movie a different type of gemstone on the same piece of jewelry. Like, they complement each other, they work together, and there's a really nice flow to it. And I don't know if you have another question lined up, but I have one for you two.
Yeah, of course.
One that I thought of was, we've seen Ridley Scott make some really great sci-fi films, and then we've also seen Ridley Scott revisit some of his own sci-fi properties to really with not much success.
You didn't love Alien Covenant?
I didn't love Alien Covenant or Prometheus.
Alien Covenant was horrible.
But that being said, this one was really good. It was a really good film, technically across the board, and it does a lot of different things. And I really think the key is Denis Villeneuve, a bunch of V's and L's. Villeneuve. French Denis. Anyways, French Canadian Denis.
That's right.
But I really think he is an integral aspect to why this movie works the way that it does.
Yes.
So my question for you is: would you be willing to see technical auteurs like Denis attempt sequels to decent movies of the past? Because I was thinking about that. I was like, it's nice to see Ridley Scott still active, and I love Blade Runner, and the idea of a sequel to Blade Runner I was a little iffy about. But it worked. It worked really well, and I really think it has everything to do with someone taking a step back and maybe like the chef being too familiar with his own ingredients, possibly.
Yeah.
Do you think that is the key factor here? And do you think this is something that Hollywood should maybe consider taking on when deciding to reboot a property or sequelize a property that's 10, 5, 20 years old? Should we attach someone who's not directly correlated with it originally?
Mo?
I don't know. I mean, like,
it kind of works, but you know what also worked really well was Evil Dead, the new one. But
Mad Max.
Mad Max. But the difference with Mad Max was Mad Max had its original director.
Yes,
it doesn't
that's
always
true,
work
yeah.
out that way. Like, so, I mean, don't get me wrong. They can't all be Mad Max Fury Road, but maybe the best chance for success for some of these sequels and not feeling like just a repeat of something original is to bring in some new blood who will truly respect the material.
But at what point is it? I don't know. I say this. I think we're gonna get a better answer in December when The Last Jedi comes out, because Force Awakens. I liked Force Awakens, but it's very much J.J. Abrams doing his best impression of George Lucas.
It's Star Wars Mad Libs.
Star Wars Man.
It's that's an accurate description.
I'm not denying it.
I'm trying to think of like other examples where we've had like long gestating sequels to properties done by someone else, where like the director, producer, whoever hands over the reins.
I think the next one I can think of is Hellboy.
Oh yeah.
The next
Hellboy's a
one.
reboot. Hellboy's like, okay, I don't know why we're making this version of Hellboy when it's like there's enough juice in the property that will make a new Hellboy, but not enough juice that will just do a sequel.
Yeah, don't even get me started on that one.
I don't get it. I don't know. It's something interesting to do because we reached that J.J. Abrams question. Like, how much do we bring in someone who can just mimic the original, and how much do we bring in someone who's going to bring their own flavor to it?
Yeah.
I think it's a blend. I mean, that movie feels like Ridley Scott's world, but it feels like Dennis's eye.
But with like more money in it.
Well, obviously more money, but I mean,
Well, it
just
feels like
maybe-
an extension of Arrival.
That's
in
what
a
I was
lot
gonna
of
say.
ways.
Like a lot of ways, it feels like Arrival. I mean, when you look at Arrival and the aesthetic and the feel of it, that's what I also get from this. It just feels like Dennis's look and feel
The slow,
in a different
kind of calm
different
rhythm.
world. Yeah.
The little cameras look like the heptapods and their ships.
Yeah.
With the the little
The Jared Leto cameras.
Okay, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I hate
yeah.
those things
no,
creep me
absolutely.
out.
I mean, this was a great question, and I think to answer it, I think we got to look at how this movie came to be. I mean, the reason this movie got made was because Alcon Entertainment really needed a hit. They bought the rights to Blade Runner. They went to Ridley Scott. They said, "Do you think there's a story in this?" Ridley Scott, because Ridley Scott will pretty much do anything, said yes. And then Denis Villeneuve came in. But here's the thing. I mean, Denis Villeneuve loves that original movie so much. I mean, he said, and this is almost exactly what he said. He said it's linked to the birth of my love of cinema. So that's it's in his DNA. He had a personal stake in bringing a sequel to life. It came from, I think, his soul, because I think you do see some of the concerns of Arrival. Some of the themes, some personal stuff. It doesn't just kind of feel like the J.J. Abrams thing where he's mimicking Ridley Scott, although he certainly pays homage to him. And so that's my rule with sequels. It's always going to be a corporate imperative, because every sequel starts with a studio saying we want more, but it cannot just be that. It's got to be it's got to have a filmmaker who's gonna inject something they believe in. I mean, you bring up Fury Road. George Miller had this idea of a Mad Max movie that would focus on Furiosa, this very different sort of character from Mad Max, and so that gave that movie a reason to exist. Just as I think the hook of pregnancy and the replicants realizing they're just as good as humans, I think gives Blade Runner a hook. So I think there's got to be a personal reason. It's got to go beyond the corporate imperative. And if the person who can do that, who cares that much, is fresh new blood like Villeneuve, then I say have at it. That's the best reason I can think of to make any movie.
Good tangent.
Awkward silence. Did you hear about that whole thing? 5 second pause, or whatever they call it in conversation. It's like a thing. But I know what I wanted to ask you guys.
Okay.
I mean, Harrison Ford is actually not in this movie that much.
Yeah.
I mean, when he's in it, he makes, I would argue, a very, very strong impression. You know, you feel the weight of the history of that first film and the 30 years after. But this is Ryan Gosling's movie. You know, he's front and center for this movie, and I'm just curious to hear, you know, what you guys think of his character and how he compares to Deckard, because he's cut from the same, you know, noir trench coat in the shadows cloth, but he's a very different sort of character. So Mo, what do you think of Consonant K, as they say?
Well, first off, I don't know why they went with Joe as his human name instead of Philip, which is the obvious choice since his initials are KD.
Well, I think they went with it because when the hologram of Joy at the end calls him Joe, so that must be like a name that's, you know, in all the joys. And
I think it's just a name in her algorithm, and it's like,
Sure.
oh, that's just what I should call you. Like, it's that thing that, again, it's that moment that you realize Joy was so human, but at the same time, at her very core, it's still just a program.
Yes,
And that's that moment when he realizes that. That's that moment where you go, oh shit, Ryan Gosling's gonna kill Harrison Ford.
But getting back to that, I think Deckard. I think a big reason why I wasn't in love with this movie is because I was not terribly attached to Kay, and I think that's partially by design, and I think it's a misalignment of goals, because Kay feels very much like he's a blank slate, and I get that it's on purpose because, you know, he's a robot, but he's this sort of neutral character we follow, and it's through his eyes that we see the world, and it's through his eyes that we understand the world. But then he has to go and carry the movie and be like the emotional center of it. And he's a character who's not supposed to be good with emotions, so it feels off to me. Deckard came off very strong in the first one, because he was kind of he was our POV character, but there was a lot of pessimism. There was this weary view of the world that was really tangible, and Harrison Ford sold that. I feel less of that with Kay. With Kay, it's just like he's going around and doing stuff, and maybe he's curious about things, but it's very good that he had Joy with him, because otherwise he has no one to play off, and it's just him, and it would not have worked.
She's almost there in a way, so he can say, you know, things.
She's the Watson.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Ryan Reynolds did fine. Or, god damn it, that is the third time that's happened. What the fuck?
Gosling.
I think Gosling did fine.
Baby Goose.
But you know, Deckard, he left an impression, and he was someone. Like,
Max?
yeah.
I think you're inherently supposed to like Deckard more. I mean, Deckard's a more interesting character. He's more human. He is human. He has the personality, and I mean, but that's kind of the point of Ryan Gosling's character. He's not supposed to have a personality because he's a robot. So, but Mo does bring up a good point, is that this like vacant, emotionless, it's, you know, acting, it only yields so much, and it's really good that he had Joy to work off of. And I don't know if somebody was like, he needs a Watson, or maybe they were just like, let's give him a Watson, and it just worked out that way. Do you ever wonder that? Like, do you think somebody wrote an entire movie without Joy, and someone was like, this is not working, and they're like, he needs to talk to someone, and then Joy was added in. Like, that was my question. I was like, I wonder if that was like an afterthought. But I mean, either
the
way, it
interesting
works.
thing is like, you know, with the first film, you know, Hampton Fancher wrote the early drafts, and you know, at a certain point he was like, you know, I'm not changing anything else, I'm done. So they bring in this guy David Peoples to rewrite it, you know, under Ridley Scott's supervision. You know, not exactly the same, but similar thing, you know, happened with this movie. Hampton Fancher came up with the story with Ridley Scott, you know, and wrote the script, but then Michael Green, who I think was involved with American Gods, came in and wrapped it up. So It's kind of fun. So maybe what you said did happen. It's conceivable.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. It's just funny. I mean, but ultimately, I mean, it worked and it paid off. So that's the best part.
On the subject of Kay, I mean, I was really skeptical when Gosling was cast in this. It's like Ryan Gosling, aren't they gonna have just Harrison Ford play the whole thing? And then I saw the trailers, and suddenly it clicked for me because, as you guys know, I'm a diehard fan of Drive, and I think in that movie, Gosling became like the kind of ultimate modern neo-noir hero because he's I mean, we've seen him play, you know, lively guys, you know, who crack jokes. He's very funny in La La Land. He's very funny in Crazy Stupid Love. But as Drive proved, you know, in some way he's at his best, I think, when he's a silent movie actor. You know, when he's, you know, acting just with, you know, really subtle things like a look in his eye, or even a tilt of his head. You know, there's a great scene in Drive where he asks Oscar Isaac a question, and Oscar Isaac doesn't answer, and Ryan Gosling tilts his head toward him, and that's his way of saying, "You're gonna tell me." He says that all just with that one motion, and I think I found his facial expressions, you know, really expressive in this. You know, he was robotic, you know, but then, you know, when you needed a little something more, you know, he would flash a smile, you know, or a look of torment. But I really think a lot of his character, you know, I mean, he is a blank slate, you know, we've talked about, he has to be, and a lot of the reason why he works is because of the storytelling, you know, because of the situation he's put in at the beginning, you know. Sapper, Dave Bautista's character, says something like, you know, how does it feel killing your own kind? You see, you know, this guy who is, you know, programmed to turn against his own people, and you feel the tragedy of that because you have to get that great moment where he picks up the flower from the tree, and I love that because that symbolizes him looking for something more. You know, he can't resist. He can't defy his programming. He couldn't spare Sapper's life, but he can go pick up this flower. You know, he can rebel in these small ways, and I think it's an incredible journey he goes on, trying to find something more and trying to break out of the mold if he can, and also, and I promise I'm wrapping up this insanely long spiel in a sec, but think about the conflict in the character, how he's sort of horrified at the prospect of being a man of a woman born, which sounds like a line from Macbeth, oddly enough. But at the same time, he goes to find Deckard. He's excited by that, and the mixture of horror and excitement, you know, the fact that even though it means he won't be hunted, he's disappointed when he finds out he wasn't born. You know, he's lost that which makes him special. And, you know, as I said before, science fiction is very predicated on the idea of the chosen one, whether it's Anakin Skywalker or Neo or Katniss in the Hunger Games. And this goes against that. This says, you know, this guy is not special, whatever Joy may say. He's not the chosen one, but he has the ability to do one thing. He can save one man's life and unite that man with his daughter, and he does that. And it's a small thing. It doesn't mean a lot in the grand scheme of things, but it does mean something, and that's why I like the character.
He has, I think the bigger idea is that he's not special, and that's the point, is that he has the capacity to evolve. Like, we see him lie to a superior officer. We see him break the baseline test and fail that.
Yeah.
And it's not because his programming permitted it, it's because he thought he didn't have programming.
Yes, yeah. I think that's such an important thing.
I think that's the better determining line is that, you know, I really love that part where where Ryan Gosling finds out he's not the chosen one, but the woman who tells him, she goes, you know, she goes, you thought it was you. She goes, I'm so sorry. She goes, we all wish it was us.
I love that line.
That idea that we all want to be that one special person that's gonna like somehow change the fate of whatever. But ultimately, you know, we're not. Some of us just have to play a role. And she goes, right now the role I need you to play is someone who's going to kill Harrison Ford because he can't live. And then even then, he's like, I want to do something that's not that. And that he doesn't have to listen to orders. He doesn't even have to listen to requests. He can make whatever choices he wants, and I think that is really a better message to get from it. Although I'm going to say, just piggyback on your point real quick, I don't really care for Ryan Gosling in his robotic acting. Like, I think he can
I don't think it's robotic, though.
Well,
I think he is expressive.
I think he can do it, and he does get it. But you know what? It's like there's only so many times I want to see him play this emotionally despondent character that has to say everything with a single eye look. I'm like, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's nice to know that he can do it, but I don't want to see it for 5 movies.
I don't want to see it for 5 movies either. Not because I don't like it, because I love it, but I mean, just I don't want any actor to be caught in a rut.
Yeah,
know?
and so
he should
really,
evolve.
I know.
Like Kay.
And so, I mean, I really hope to see more just diverse roles for Ryan Gosling as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. The moment when he says, when he chooses, he's not gonna follow programming from either side. He's not going to kill Deckard, even for the quote-unquote good guys, and kind of made me flash back to Return of the Jedi and Luke, defying his father by not turning to the dark side, but also defying his mentors by saying, I'm not going to kill my father. And these, and it's interesting, these sci-fi stories. I think a theme is that overriding your programming, and you have to become a human being, to become a man. In this case, you do have to make choices on your own, and I think it's interesting that keeps floating back up to the surface in different ways.
When you talk about it like that, my nerd brain goes back to Avatar: The Last Airbender, where you guys have seen that, or
yes, I have.
No.
Okay.
Oh, with the cartoon, or the
cartoon?
Okay. Good, not the Shyamalan movie.
No, we don't talk about that.
We're not talking about that right now.
That shall not be named.
No, but I'm going to go ahead and spoil it for you, even though the show is like
several years done.
12 years old by now. But it's like the whole thing is that he has to kill the Fire Lord. Like, he has to beat the Fire Lord and bring back balance to the world. And he's like, we get to like the final stretch of episodes, and it's like, oh wait, I didn't realize or at least it never occurred to him that he was going to actually have to end this guy's life.
Like murder.
And like kill someone, which goes against everything he believes, everything he was raised to do. And he talks to people, like everyone who is in the know somehow basically says the same thing. It's like, you do what you got to do for the good of the world. It's a hard sacrifice to make, but you have to do it. And then he finds a way around it, and he finds another way. And the implication here is that because he does this because he's a kid, because he is like, take away the fact that he was in like cryostasis for a century. He's 10 years old, and he has this very innocent, idealistic belief in the world, and that's what helps him do a better job. It helps him save a life, even the life of a monster, of a tyrant. He's able to do that. So is there, I'm wondering if there's something similar to that, if there's this, if not necessarily a idealism to Kay, but at least a naivete. Which puts him in stark contrast to Deckard.
Yes, there's both. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's the naivete of wanting to believe that he's the son of Deckard and Rachel, and there's the idealism of as I think you alluded to, making that choice to save a life at the end, and then, again, I think idealism is something that's so rooted in the DNA of science fiction. I mean, again, looking back to Villeneuve's Arrival, Amy Adams' character is incredibly idealistic. You have Michael Stuhlbarg, saying, let's, be safe. We have to consider these aliens are a threat. And, Amy Adams, believes they have something to offer and puts herself at risk to prove that belief. And it's a dangerous thing to do. And I think that's something that's it's really profound. I mean, I keep circling back to War for the Planet of the Apes, and I'm gonna do it again because it's just so great. It's another movie where the hero doesn't kill the villain. There's idealism there, and I think idealism is particularly potent when it's in a morally bleak situation.
Yeah. Well, it's
I
just
feel- I
that
feel-
raises those odds. It's like, man, things when you make the good choice, it seems extra good when everything is terrible and it's so easy to make the bad choice.
Yeah.
So,
Mo, what were you gonna say?
I feel like this is getting off topic, but I feel like those are two different animals. Is what happens in War for the Planet of the Apes versus in 2049.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, they're different things for sure.
It does, but I don't.
I think I just think
necessarily
idealism plays a role in both.
I don't necessarily see idealism. Maybe a little, but it reminds. I'm gonna call back on something else. I'm gonna call back on a comic book, and that would be Jason Aaron's run on Thor: God of Thunder, where we get to the end of his first like major story arc, and like we've beaten the bad guy, and his plan has fallen apart. He's seen that how extremely fragile this world he created, this plan he created actually was, and then they kill him. And they don't make a big deal of it. It's not like this big defining moment. It's just like, okay, you realize you lost. He's dead. Let's move on. And it's. I saw War of the Planet of the Apes very similarly. It's that point where the villain realizes their own inadequacy and their own fear, and that's what brings them down. The fact that they die or are killed is irrelevant because they've realized that they don't matter.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I see I see something else with Blade Runner, but that speaks to a different idea I had about Love as a character, because she was probably my favorite character in the movie.
sorry. I was just gonna say, Love. My brother's partner noted. They're like, I love. They're like, those are the best characters. She goes, she's feminine, yet she's strong. She's merciless, and yet she does obviously care about something. Like, even if it's just being the best or being the best employee of Jared Leto. She goes, honestly, she'd love that character, and I would have to agree. I was like, that was probably the strongest female character in the whole movie, but there was still a lot of really great ones. But
and yet she's a slave. That's what makes the character so
she's
tragic.
A slave. She's a villain. But so much good stuff going on there.
Oh yeah.
This speaks back to my favorite part of the original movie was Roy Batty, and she is so much like the new incarnation of Roy Batty, but the negative. Like Roy Batty is a slave, but he's fighting for his freedom. He's fighting for his humanity, and that's what defines him. This is my reading, so call me out if I'm off on this, but I really felt like her deal was internalized self-hatred. That she does have this hatred towards other replicants, that she just looks down on them, and that she idolizes humanity, like the tenderness that she treats Robin Wright with Harrison Ford at the end. That's how I read it, and that's interesting. That's really something to me. So that I liked.
Yeah, no, I think the interesting thing is, so she's such a brutal, ruthless character. I mean, squeezing Robin Wright's hand with the glass. I mean, some of that
calling
stuff.
in a drone strike while she's getting her nails done.
Yeah, I mean, some of that stuff is just spine tingling and kind of stomach churning, frankly, in an impressive and artistic way, of course. But I think what's interesting is she could have just been a mindless killing machine. She could have been, but
we expect more out of this story.
We do, and you get these moments where you see a tear running down her cheek, and you get the idea that I sort of interpret it as this persona she has, this ruthless persona. It's created to serve, and there's something else fighting to get out, but she's under lock and key, and so in the end the only way to quote unquote save her is to kill her. And I appreciated that the movie didn't treat her death as this triumphant moment. The camera lingers on her body underneath the water. It forces you to look at her, to see her stripped of life. And I think I agree with you guys. I think she is one of the most interesting characters in the movie, and it's because there are these nuances, and because she's not the T-1000 in Terminator, you know? I mean, and why would you want it to be? Although the T-1000 is wonderful in his/its own right.
Yes.
I also like Jared Leto in this movie, which is not something I've said before.
I did too. I
I mean, he
thought it was
wasn't
great.
really there that much, but yeah, I mean, when he was there, he was used quite well. I liked it.
Like this is from my personal experience, but I think I mentioned this before. I definitely have mentioned this before, but I watch a lot of videos from H Bomber Guy on YouTube who. He does like deep dive analyses into video games and TV shows, but what attracted me and a lot of people to his channel was that he will do these really funny just takedowns of alt-right people on YouTube.
Nice.
And like that's part of his jam is just making fun of them, and it's like, you know, at one point he basically says, people ask me, why don't you take their arguments seriously? Why do you just make fun of these little details in their presentation? It's like, I can't take them seriously. These people are idiots and lunatics. And Jared Leto felt very much like he was pulled from that sort of, that same mold of the alt-right, of looking back on the history of slavery and colonialism, and it's like, yeah, it sucks, but it was necessary.
Right.
So, and it's like, come on, you're not going to endear yourself to a lot of people by defending slavery.
It was very chilling when he says, you know, we've lost our stomach for slaves, and so like,
but it's effective.
It is effective, and I think like it's sort of a revelatory thing where this thing that you know any decent person would see as just an abomination. He's like just sort of like, it's an inconvenience that people don't think that's okay anymore, which is so horrifying. Really,
the moral comfortability of this movie is really weird.
It's his cynicism against the idealism of the replicants.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I like Jared Leto as well. I think one of the things I liked about Tyrell in the first film is that he's this kind of mechanical guy, up in his pyramid, shut off from the world, and the idea that it goes back to 2001: A Space Odyssey of in the future when humanity's isolated technology, it's the robots who start to become more human, and I like that Jared Leto was very robotic. Like he's been indoors for decades and is kind of lost any sense of how to live life. And,
So, who was your favorite character in the movie?
I already said it was Love. Besides that, I don't know. I like Barkhad Abdi. He was fun.
He was fun. Yeah.
I liked seeing Edward James Olmos again for 5 seconds.
Yes. Yeah. That was good. Still doing origami like a pro.
Oh yeah. You gotta keep yourself busy somehow.
Yeah.
Not really a whole lot besides that.
Nice.
You. Ben, who's your favorite character?
Kay. I mean, he was. He was our guide through this story, and I think I remember there was a line. I think it was in Entertainment Weekly. Maybe Leah Greenblatt wrote it, and she said something about even when the movie's emotions risk running as cool as its palette, and I was like, oh no, is this going to be kind of a cold-hearted movie? And I don't think it was at all. I think it was a great Pinocchio story about a synthetic creature really wanting to be something more, or a Tin Man like in The Wizard of Oz wanting to have a heart. And I think
something a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's what gives the movie its emotional heft.
Other than Love, instantly, the Dream Maker.
Oh yeah.
Whose name I cannot remember for the life of me.
Carla Yuri.
Yeah, she when you
were
first.
all the women in this movie French or French?
They're all some form of foreign.
I'm not good with accents.
But
I don't know what nationality she is. Yeah.
But instantly, just like the Dream Maker, and then you come in and she just lives in this bubble and she creates life. And I also like that she goes, I'm not like everyone. She goes, I know what crowds are before they were taken away from me. She goes, I developed this disease, and she lives in this little world, creating worlds, creating memories, and that she watches Gosling's dream or memory and starts crying herself, and it's so, she has this weird aura about her that when I saw it, I was just instantly like in love, and I'm so glad that even if I got that one scene with her, I would have been fine, and the fact that I got a second one was even better. And Joy. I think it was really, it was so interesting to see these three different women, because you got one that's, all the different women. You got one woman who is a slave, but wants to be the best slave in the entire world, and is ruthless and cool the entire time. And then you got Robin Wright, who's just trying to keep the peace. At any cost. And, including, maybe possibly killing a child.
Yeah.
That's not a replicant. Then you got Joy, who is who's the most human hologram you'll ever meet in your entire life, who genuinely loves Ryan Gosling's character, or at least you feel that way.
Yeah.
And then even just for this brief blip, this woman who makes memories for replicants. They all serve such different parts in this world, and they're all so unique and distinct, but none of them made me love them just so instantaneously. This air about her, it was beautiful. I loved it.
Something I definitely liked about Joy is just in her movements, in the fact that it looks. I'm gonna break the rule, and I'm gonna talk about The Last Airbender. It's like the special effects there are fine, but it becomes at many points very clear that the actors are not with whatever they're interacting with. It really obviously because of the way they're acting or how they're directed or whatever, it's very clear. It's you're interacting with something that's not there. I got the same vibe with Joy and with Kay, but that's what you're supposed to get, because she can't actually touch him, because she's a hologram. So there is sort of that scene where he's looking over the DNA records. There's that awkward movement of her kind of hugging him and kind of floating around him, but not actually touching him, and that was effective to me. I liked that. I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah,
beautiful.
I liked the image of her face over his, and it was just so interesting, kind of this merging of a man and a woman, and kind of I liked the. I don't know how much it means, but I just think it's interesting. There's sort of this gender bending moment in there. It adds an interesting element to the whole thing.
I love the not touching thing. They just get so close all the time, and it was so intimate, and at the same time, you just got it. And also, props to the CGI team for always making her at some point somewhat translucent. At times you could see through her. You could see it was when she was wearing the dress when she had simulated sex with Ryan Gosling. It was hard to look at the dress because you could see the pattern on the inside of the back of the dress reflecting through the front of the dress, and it was creating a real mess on your eyes. And it wasn't until she stepped into another body, you're like, oh, okay, now it all somehow looks normal. It worked. It was that scene really played with my mind. I was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about any of this.
It was a very beautiful effect. Sometimes she looks like Joy, sometimes she looks like Mackenzie Davis, sometimes she looks like a combination of both. It's very hallucinatory.
The motion of her taking off the dress as opposed to the motion of Mackenzie taking off the shirt are two different things.
Yeah.
Throwback Guardians, go.
Again, it's very Uncanny Valley, and deliberately so, and it works.
Yes, yeah. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we sign off?
Are we going to get another sequel at some point, do you think?
Here, I don't think it's going to happen right away. I don't know if you guys are following the box office numbers. They weren't that impressive. If there is another sequel, I think the only way to do it is to, do it in 30 more years and, have some new young director, come in and say, this is what Blade Runner means to my time, and
by that point we'll have perfected Tarkining people, so we can make young Ryan Gosling and have him be the old Harrison Ford.
There we go. That sounds perfect.
Say it ain't so.
We did that with Sean Young. We had Tarkin Sean Young.
I did not like that.
I was fine with it.
It worked with the plot, but I was like, come on.
I think there was a body double, so it wasn't
Actually, it was Sean Young.
No, but it said
there was a body double credited.
Yeah.
Damn.
So I imagine it's like a body double who looks like young Sean Young, but with like,
Sean Young's voice,
her
and
face
maybe-
and voice put over it.
Yeah, it's, like she got a credit.
Yeah.
Sean Young did.
No, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the best course of action is don't expect one, just let it happen naturally, and yeah, maybe 20 years from now, let's have another sequel.
Yeah, I mean, something I liked about this is, of course I can visualize what a sequel looks like, Maybe it would have this replicant revolution, like with, Deckard's daughter, as the protagonist. But at the same time, like, if it ended here, I would be fine, because I sort of like the idea that we don't see the revolution. It's just sort of like a candle in the night, and we're seeing it being lit up here.
I mean, it could have been so easy to cut the story down and made it a revolution story, and I'm so proud of them for not.
Yeah, because then it wouldn't be later, or it wouldn't have that kind of
It's not
quiet
an
hush noir poetry.
It's not an introspective movie. It's an introspective detective story. It's a war movie.
Yeah, in that case, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It worked. That's all I have. I would say go see it. It's worth seeing in theaters. I mean, it's worth the big ticket.
Yeah.
Decide for yourself.
All right. Well, yeah, I would. That's all I got. But believe it or not, this review is going to continue in a fashion due to conflicting schedules. We're splitting it up into. Soon you'll be able to check out the second part of this review, which I'm going to do with Patrick Billin and with our newest recruit, Hannah McGrath Purdue, who is joining us. Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you liked it, and why wouldn't you, please click thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and check out all the great reviews and content we have at thomoviereviews.wordpress.com. Once again, I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson. I'm here with Shaunette. I'm here with Maxwell Meyers. And from all of us here at T.H.O. Movie Reviews, happy movie watching.
Okay, bye.
Bye.